So if you've just started to play the guitar, maybe you've already watched some tutorials already and you feel like something is still not clicking, I have been in your position. I've been playing the guitar professionally for 11 years and throughout this whole process I've made a lot of errors that slowed me down. But don't worry, because in this video I'll walk you through the 10 things I wish I knew as a beginner guitarist, so you will not have to make my mistakes. I'll show you exactly what to avoid so you can learn the guitar faster and in the most efficient way. The first thing that you need to pay attention to when you've just started playing the guitar is to check your thumb position. If you've been struggling with chord changes or hand cramps, you need to check your thumb because it matters more than you think. When learning the guitar, most beginners focus only on finger placement, but the thumb position is equally as important and often overlooked. Please make sure that you're not holding your thumb horizontal like this, but vertical behind the fingers like this. Because if you lay your thumb horizontal on the fretboard like this, it really limits your movement and it makes fretting notes and chords a lot harder than it should be. Another thing you need to make sure of when you're adjusting the thumb position of your guitar is you need to make sure that you're not gripping the whole fretboard like this, but gently supporting it on the back of the fretboard like this. Don't place your thumb too high because then you cannot play any bar chords, and don't place it too low because then you'll get strain in your arm. I want to give you a little bit more of a detailed explanation of what can happen if you position your thumb incorrectly behind the fretboard. Because if I would position it horizontally behind the fretboard like this, and if I would want to get the fourth note of the high E string, for example, I would create a lot of strain in my wrist, and that is something you really need to avoid, especially when you've just started. You can try it for yourself now, but after that, never do it again. And if you would rest your thumb gently behind the fretboard like this, it will be much easier to get the same note. But the height also matters, because if you grip the fretboard like this, again you will run into the same problem of adding strain to your wrist. And if you would put your thumb too low behind the fretboard like this to get the stretch, you will get the stretch. But then you would also add a lot of unnecessary space over here, which you would then want to overcompensate with your underarm, and then the strain will be in your arm instead of your wrist. The second thing you need to avoid when you're just playing the guitar is you need to stop obsessing over gear and focus more on skills. Because a lot of beginner players think, oh, if I get this expensive amplifier or this equipment, I will be able to play the guitar. But a great guitar player will make any gear sound good. And with that, I'm not saying that a good guitarist can do a solo on like a piece of wood, but I am saying that you should not focus on expensive equipment. Good guitar gear will definitely enhance your sound, but it should not be a distraction of the actual playing. So instead of buying cool new gear, invest that same time in your practice. Because the consistency of your practice sessions, the way you use your hand, the motivation, all those things are gonna matter way more in the long term than a cool piece of gear. And this brings me to my next tip to help you learn the guitar in the most efficient and fastest way possible. But before I do that, I need you to hit that subscribe button on my channel, because I upload a brand new tutorial every single day on how you can become a better guitar and ukulele player. So after you've subscribed to my channel, let's move on to my next tip to help you learn the guitar in the fastest and most efficient way. The third thing that you need to avoid when you're playing the guitar is tension. Because one of the biggest mistakes that you can make as a beginner guitar player is playing with too much tension from the beginning already. Too much tension while playing will definitely slow you down, it will make the playing a lot less comfortable, and it will make the playing a lot less fun as well. So please make sure that you're not gripping the neck too tightly, not pressing the strings too hard, and also not putting tension on your playing hand. Because if the wrist of your playing hand is too stiff, it will make your strumming very robotic and your finger picking a lot less precise. If you feel tension in your hands, in your shoulders, and even your arms, shake it loose, take a deep breath, and just take a break. Staying relaxed will improve your endurance, your motivation, and eventually your speed. The fourth thing that you need to avoid when you're playing the guitar is making the process of learning much harder than it needs to be. You need to use the right strings, and this could be the thing that is holding you back. You need to use the right strings when you're just playing the guitar. Steel string in general is more difficult than nylon strings, so if you have no protective layer on your fingertips, I'd recommend starting with nylon strings before switching to steel ones. Another thing that you should make sure of is that the strings are not too thick, because thicker strings are more difficult to bend, more difficult to press, and more difficult to navigate around. And while it is true that thicker steel strings produce a fuller tone, they require more finger strength. So switch to the right strings and it will be much easier for you. Tip number 5 for a smooth guitar sound: don't press the frets too hard and let the guitar do the work. I kind of said it already, but one of the most common beginner mistakes is pressing the strings way too hard. And it might feel as if adding pressure will produce a fuller tone, but actually that's not really the case. Let me show you the quickest way to get a full sound out of your notes without pressing too hard. The first thing you need to make sure that you're doing when you're pressing notes or chords on the guitar is you need to play the notes right in front of the fret like this. Because if I would position my finger over here, thus creating more space between my finger and the fret, I would have to press way harder to get the same tone. The next thing that you need to make sure that you're doing when you're pressing notes or chords on the guitar is to always keep your fingers parallel to the frets like this and not like this. Because if you would play like this, you would add a lot of unwanted strain to your wrist, and that is also something you need to avoid. The sixth thing that might be holding you back as a beginner guitar player is ignoring the rhythm, because you can play all the right notes and memorize the whole piece, but if your timing is off, the whole thing will sound not good. A very common mistake is only focusing on the melody and ignoring the groove. But rhythm is the foundation of music, so you need to get that right from the start. You can fix this by keeping your strumming and your playing consistent by tapping your foot or by counting in your head. You can also practice with the backing track that already has a rhythm, so you can just play along with it and actually subconsciously improve your sense of rhythm. The seventh thing that you need to avoid when you've just picked up the guitar is playing with zero dynamics. This is one of the quickest ways to make your guitar playing sound lifeless and flat. So don't play the notes of a melody with the same exact force, but try to diversify the pressure that you're adding onto every note. So instead of this, I'm just gonna pick a boring melody. You can do Okay, so let me show you how exactly I added those dynamics in the solo I just played. So the first thing I did was to add vibratos to my notes. So instead of playing the notes like this, just flat out, I added a little bit more dimension and depth by wobbling my finger like this from left to right. You can also do it from top to bottom. The second thing I did to add some dynamics to my solos was to add a hammer-on like this. So instead of playing the two notes separately, I'm building a link between the notes by playing the string once and then with my middle finger hammering on right in front of the fret of the second note that I want to get a sound of. So like this. The eighth thing that I wish I knew as a beginner guitar player, and the thing that you can avoid right now from the start, is to always make sure that you're practicing smooth chord transitions. Because oftentimes beginners rush through the process. Don't rush the process, because a common mistake I see with beginner players is that they're just focusing on learning the chords without actually switching between them in the correct rhythm. The best way that you can avoid those annoying stops when you're switching, for example, between A minor and C major like this, is to slow it down and make it so slow that you won't even notice that you're actually looking for the next chord. So instead of this, and then repositioning looking for the next chord, you can do this, slow and steady. And in that time, you're actually looking, but you're also switching. The ninth thing that you need to avoid when you're just starting playing the guitar is relying too much on tabs. Tabs are great, but if you only use tabs, you're definitely missing out on a lot more. And it's so easy to fall into the pitfall trap of only learning songs through chords or sheet music, but this can definitely hinder your growth as a guitarist. And while tabs are great for learning specific songs, they don't teach you ear training, they don't teach you how to play certain notes, how to add elements and emotion to your music. Those are crucial skills for any serious guitar player. And another bad thing that could happen when you're relying only on tabs is you could become very dependent on them. It could feel like, oh, I cannot play anything without my tabs, without my sheet music, and you want to become independent as an artist, as a musician. You can still use tabs as a guideline to memorize certain pieces, but when you're learning a song, I will challenge you from now on, look at what the hand is doing. You should also really listen to what you're hearing, because then you will develop a much better understanding of what you're hearing and you'll be able to compose pieces. Ear training will be better and you will develop a lot of other soft skills in the process. And the 10th and last mistake that you can make as a beginner guitar player, and this is actually one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, skipping technique practice. And I know it's very tempting to jump straight into learning songs when you're just picking up the guitar, but skipping technique practice is like building a house on shaky foundations. Like, the basis needs to be there. Without proper technique, you will definitely struggle with accuracy, control and speed in the long term. I can guarantee you that. But lucky for you, I have a solution to all of this, because I've made a video on how to get faster fingers in just 7 days. It's an overview of the most efficient exercises that you can do as a beginner guitar player, and it will definitely make your process much easier and faster. So if you want to stick around, please make sure to watch the video on screen to continue your guitar learning process, and I hope to see you soon in the next video.